I actually wanted to play this for you guys because, as you guys know, the corporate media has boxed out Bernie Sanders ever since he started his presidential run in 2016. There were Harvard studies that had proved this, so it's not just conjecture or made up. The corporate media has boxed out Bernie Sanders. Okay, that's what it does. All right, and so anytime we have, someone go on and really push for Bernie Sanders on a mainstream media outlet, let alone CNN, it's very important to highlight it, especially when it's from somebody who's as well known as Killer Mike. Killer Mike is one half of Run the Jewels. He was a big Bernie supporter back in 2016. He's also a Bernie supporter now. So big shout out to Killer Mike. He goes on CNN and he spits some absolute fire. So I want you guys to check out this video, then we're going to come back and talk about this.
Let's bring in activist and Grammy Award-winning rapper Michael Bender, a.k.a. Killer Mike, who is a surrogate for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Killer Mike, good to have you here.
Hey, Anna. It's Render. Also, I don't want my dad to get mad at me. How you doing?
Mike Render. I don't want to mess that up either. I'm sorry to insult you as I introduced you. How dare I?
No, it's not an insult. That's why I said Anna, not Anna, because I took the Spanish classes last week with my man Noriega, and I pronounced it right, so I'm proud of myself. How you doing?
Okay, now that we're past the names, let's talk about the state of the race. And I want to back up for just a moment to a couple of days ago and the election victory for conservatives in the United Kingdom. Joe Biden suggests that bolsters his electability here in the U.S. against President Trump. Do you see that as a warning shot to progressive candidates about the party moving too far left?
I think that, like the America that dared to stop being colonies and become a country, we need to do the most radical and progressive calls that we can. We need to be radical and progressive in our policy, and we need to not trust, in this moment, fear. We need to not trust saying, let's play it safe. I think we need to play the radical idea that formed America. We need to do that right now and push radical policy. I think that universal health care is doable. I think that wiping away student loans so the next 20 years of students' lives can be invested in making a better America, not just paying back debt, is good. I think trade school is good. I think ending the school-to-prison pipeline is good. And we have to think that radically in order to come to the solutions that we need as a country to progress.
So it explains a lot why you are backing the candidate who is, the revolutionist of sorts, and he's talked about a political revolution. Poll after poll, however, has shown Sanders consistently in second or third. No one can argue that his supporters lack passion for his campaign and his message, but he's not been able to grow his support beyond the teens. Has he hit a ceiling?
I'd like to congratulate him on being the most growth in South Carolina, 7% up in South Carolina. He's up amongst millennials as I see. I hear polls, but you never know who's polling. You never knew where they're polling and why. What I know is I walk the streets of America as a musician every day. I'm on and off planes every day. Young people are coming up to me as young as 17, like I'm going to be 18 by this election. I'm voting for him. As old as 28 and 35 to say he's re-energized and regaining me interest in voting. I just left a barbershop full of black people in North Carolina. They are intent on voting for Sanders and people like him. We want progress and we want it now. I don't say the word revolutionary in mockery because we are here as a result of the American Revolution. Had not those colonists dared to dream America, we would not be. If Sanders does not dare to dream the dreams that he's dreaming, we will not have the future that I think is possible in 20 years. So I'm with the revolutionary and I'm with the radical policy.
You're right. He is popular among the younger demographic, but at age 78, he is the oldest of all the 2020 candidates. And CNN polls this week out of California and Texas show he only has single-digit support with those 65 and older, and not much more than that even with 45 and older. Historically, the older voters tend to be the most reliable voters. Does his struggle to connect with them concern you?
No. I think that a lot of times we vote out of fear and we're told what to do by a couple different television stations. I think that if young people get out locally and door knock and engage people that are the age of their parents and grandparents, we'll see those demographics start to change as well. It's time to set fire to the ground locally. The young people that shake my hand in airports, that stop me in restaurants, are going to be the young people putting on Barney t-shirts and going out and knocking on those doors. I don't think that we should in this moment allow fear to negotiate for us. I think that we should negotiate from a place of firmness, of fairness, and knowing what's possible in 20 years and not living off the fear of the 20 years prior.
Next week is the next Democratic primary debate, and only one candidate of color qualified, Andrew Yang. How do you make sense of that?
I don't use the term color because my grandparents warned me against the term colored. I don't care what color you are. I care how your policy affects my community. I'm black, from a black city in Atlanta. I'm from a place where 54% of all African Americans live, and that's the South. And in terms of communities of color, be they black, Latino, or other ethnicities, I think that the policy of Sanders' campaign, much like the Poor People's Campaign of Dr. King or Eugene Debs' campaign 100 years ago before him, it is a line for all people, not just people of color, not just white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, but all people, which includes my community, the black community.
You know, sometimes people assume minority voters will automatically support minority candidates. You're obviously an example of how that's not always true. You support Sanders. Joe Biden, for example, continues to have the most support of all the candidates among black voters in places like South Carolina. Why aren't the candidates of color, the minority candidates in this race, resonating more?
I don't have the answer to those questions as I wasn't in their campaign. The campaign I'm with has risen 7 points in South Carolina, and that's Sanders' campaign. And it's because he's not asking you to vote for him on matters of color or matters of people of color or matters of just being black, on just matter of being sympathetic to our cause for over 60 years, because he was the guy that was chained to black people protesting 50, 60 years ago. He's asking because his policy directly affects our community. Well, how does it do that, Michael? We know that disproportionately health care is something that's not afforded to black and poor people in this country. His policy directly affects that. We know that the school-to-prison pipeline must be ended. We know that his tuition program for trade and college programs help to end that. We know that we need restorative justice in matters of marijuana. His policy does that. And we know we need to radically end how we deal with prisoners and addiction in this country, and he also deals with that.
Killer Mike absolutely blew the doors off of that interview. He knocked that interview right out of the park. Big shout out to Killer Mike, of course. Point after point, he was on the money, talking about how, getting rid of student loan debt will completely revitalize young people in the United States. Instead of them paying off these insane debts that they could really never pay back, honestly, they're going to stimulate the economy by actually buying normal things with their money, buying different things, whether it be cars, homes, items. That reinvigorates the economy. It spurs business, etc., etc. It stimulates the economy, right? Him talking about, I like how he brought up MLK's, very far, his left-wing policy positions and his plan for, trying to fight poverty. I like how he brought up Bernie Sanders's, his MLK, I Have a Dream speech march. No one talks about that enough because the man literally went to jail in protesting with Martin Luther King Jr. Who else can say that they did that? Hillary Clinton can't say she did that. Obviously, she was a Goldwater girl. Joe Biden can't say that. None of these people can say that, but Bernie Sanders himself can. And so when he goes on there and he advocates like this, it's awesome. And he also mentions the South Carolina poll. Now, I want to be fair because I don't like going off of one poll because I don't think it's enough data. One poll can be very skewed. But this poll was very, very positive for Bernie Sanders. It had shown like a 7-point jump or something like that. He was in very close second, I believe it was. And so what you have to understand is, folks, in the 2016 election, the reason why Bernie lost was really because of the southern states. Remember, the southern states were all the first states to go, after Iowa and New Hampshire. Now this time around it's slightly different, but I believe virtually the same. If he's able to do well with the African-American vote, he will have nipped this election in the bud. Okay, if he's able to garner African-American support amongst the African-American community, voters in the African-American community, he will emerge victorious no matter what, okay? And that's what's really important here. And so if that is an indicator, if those numbers in South Carolina are legitimate and really representative of what's going on, because there aren't many polls from South Carolina, we are looking really good in terms of this election. That's the truth of the matter. We are looking pretty darn good in this situation. So Killer Mike going on CNN, really breaking the doors down. A lot of these questions were pretty loaded questions from the host, although you could argue maybe he's playing devil's advocate and all of that stuff. But anytime someone like Killer Mike goes on mainstream media and essentially advocates for Bernie Sanders and basically takes down this centrist barrier that they have held, this corporate barrier that they have formed in attempting to prevent Bernie Sanders from getting any time on the screen, is awesome. Killer Mike has been a big help to the campaign, of course. Nina Turner's also a very big help. Obviously, she's part of the campaign. And Killer Mike is really awesome. So big shout out to Killer Mike on this one.